What's happening, Buffalo Sabres fans? Ryan Thomas here of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a lot tougher than what I would hoped it would be. This is sooner rather than later, better late than never. My reaction to the state of the Sabres currently. I posted a video on my Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take. You guys can check it out. It was about a 5.5-minute video on the state of the Sabres. This is a more in-depth look at what I feel the Buffalo Sabres should and could potentially do to fix what is the sloppiest mess of an NHL hockey team that I have ever seen. The Buffalo Sabres are coming off of their 10th straight loss, their 10th straight defeat, and I'm here to say that this is, as far as the state of the Buffalo Sabres, what is the state of the Buffalo Sabres? It is an all-time low. And to say that, to put things into perspective for the Buffalo sports fans, the diehard Buffalo sports fans know the history of this team just as well as anyone. And to say that the state of the Sabres, as we sit here right now, March 14th, 2021, to say that that is the lowest state of the Sabres currently, ever, in my opinion, it is. It says a ton. Due in large part to the fact that this team was once bankrupt. This team had ownership that, let's say, didn't do the best of things with their money, were forced to go to prison, and other people were forced to buy the team to keep the team here. To say that this state of the franchise is worse than that, I'm talking about on the ice. I'm talking about on the ice and actually off the ice, because right before all that stuff went down with the Regis ownership transferring over to Golisano, the team was actually in the midst of getting better, acquiring a few players, Chris Drury, Danny Briere, to name a few, and they went on that run that they went on in 05, 06, 06, 07. We know how that turned out. But to me, this is worse. And this is worse for the simple fact that 10 years ago, when Terry Pegula bought the Buffalo Sabres, a few years before he bought the Buffalo Bills, Terry Pegula told the whole city of Buffalo, the Buffalo Sabres nation, the Buffalo sports nation, that the sole purpose of the Buffalo Sabres was to compete and to eventually win a Stanley Cup. And yet, outside of that first season that Terry Pegula purchased the Buffalo Sabres, and the Sabres eventually made the playoffs that year, losing to the Philadelphia Flyers, the Sabres have not made the playoffs since. And the Sabres have been the complete embarrassment / laughing stock of the National Hockey League for the better part of the last 10 years. And to say that, they're an embarrassment, I don't say that proudly. I don't say that in a funny form or fashion. I am wanting the Buffalo Sabres to go back to what they were, back to the glory days of my childhood, 05, 06, 06, 07, and even, the late 90s, 98, 99. They go to the Stanley Cup against Dallas. We know how that ended. It ended with the no-goal, triple overtime Brett Hull game-winning Stanley Cup-winning goal that is kind of seared in the minds of every Buffalo sports fan as, for lack of a better term, a load of bullshit. That game ended up in terms of how we look at that. We will always look at it that way. And to know what this fan base has been through as a city, as Bills fans, as Sabres fans, to come to the conclusion that this right here, as it stands, is the biggest joke of NHL team or of a professional team that we have seen in recent Buffalo sports history, that says a ton. We were in the midst of a 17-year playoff drought with the Buffalo Bills that thankfully came to a conclusion. And dare I say it, if we were to compare the drought of the Buffalo Bills, the 17-year playoff drought of the Buffalo Bills, to the what is now 10, 11-year playoff drought, I believe, of the Buffalo Sabres, I would say that the Sabres drought is far worse. The Buffalo Bills, in the midst of their 17-year playoff drought, they went 7-9. They had some close but no cigar type seasons where they just missed the playoffs. They barely missed the playoffs, then they barely made the playoffs to actually end the drought. Whereas the Buffalo Sabres have been a complete and total basement dwelling team for the last 10 years. Willingly, for I'd say a good maybe almost half of that decade, they willingly, quote unquote, tanked in order to get players that are currently on their team. And the players that are currently on their team that they tanked for, guys like Sam Reinhart, guys like Jack Eichel, obviously, have experienced nothing but failure and losing and disappointment and embarrassment. So the question that I ask myself, knowing all that, saying all that, the question is, can the Buffalo Sabres be fixed? And of course, I think any team can be fixed. It's just a matter of finding the right people to fix it. And that is where the Buffalo Sabres have gone horribly wrong. In the last, I'd say 5 to 10 years, especially in the midst of this entire, quote unquote playoff drought that the Sabres have been through, they fired longtime head coach Lindy Ruff. I personally thought that was a mistake at the time. Granted, he had been here for almost 17 seasons, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. They weren't trending in the right direction with Lindy Ruff, but that direction that they weren't trending in is far better of a direction than this one. This is no direction, no signs of improvement, no signs of life, no signs of anything becoming better. And that is what is the scariest facet of this whole situation with the Buffalo Sabres, is that there is no sign of hope, no sign of any success that could give the Sabres fans a sigh of relief as we move into what is the tail end of the 2021 shortened season. For the fact that this is a shortened season, and it is the longest, shortest season that I could ever remember as a Buffalo sports fan, just goes to show you how terrible this Buffalo Sabres team has been. As we sit here today, as I record this video, as I record this podcast, which you can find on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube and Facebook, I remind you guys that Ralph Krueger is still the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. And guys that are in the know, guys that are within the organization, guys that follow the team extremely closely, covering the team extremely closely, guys like Andrew Peters and Craig Rivet on WGR 550's The Instigators, have said things that have hinted that they don't believe the Sabres will fire Ralph Krueger during this season. And I agree with them. I agree. I know Andrew Peters said that. I can't speak for Craig Rivet, but Andrew Peters said something to the tune of, he doesn't foresee Ralph Krueger being fired here, as the season, before the season winds down. And for the life of me, outside of any COVID-related reason, I think the number one priority is, okay, where are we at as a franchise? We are at our all-time low. Why are we at our all-time low? There's a lack of leadership from the head coaching position to the captain. And that is calling out Ralph Krueger and yes, Jack Eichel. And firing Ralph Krueger shouldn't be a thought. It should be a foregone conclusion at this point that it just didn't work. For as nice a guy as Ralph Krueger is, for as much as the players say that they like him and that he's a interesting guy and everything like that, it just has not worked out. When you lose 10 straight games, when you have only won 6 games when playing over 30, you got problems as an NHL head coach. And what really just baffles me about the whole Ralph Krueger situation and being here as Buffalo sports fan, as Buffalo Sabres fan in particular, there is an old definition for insanity, and it is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The Sabres have tried on 3 separate occasions with their last 3 NHL head coaches outside of Dan Boswell. We'll just say their last 2 NHL head coaches. I'm losing count. There's Rolston, there's Ted Nolan, there's Bilesma, there's Housley, and there's Krueger. So we could say like 3 out of their last 5 NHL head coaches in Rolston, in Housley, in Kruger, those are first-time head coaches at a long-term level in the National Hockey League. Kruger was an interim head coach for the Edmonton Oilers. Phil Housley had never been an NHL head coach before. Ron Rolston had never been an NHL head coach before. So Terry and Kim Pegula have made a silly error in judgment, not once, not twice, but 3 times over, in picking a head coach that has never done it at a prolonged level in their coaching career. And there is a difference to that. If we had brought in an NHL head coach with true NHL experience, with head coaching experience, whether they had won, whether they had lost, and it was a prolonged amount of experience, whether it was a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and we were this bad, I would say, okay, maybe we can give it some time. Maybe we can give it some time because this coach obviously has a pedigree, has a body of work that shows that if we stay patient, there's a system there that is proven to be successful. Whereas with Ralph Kruger, he was an interim head coach in Edmonton, 2012, 2013. That was a long time ago. And never really got that NHL head coaching shot, and clearly is not an NHL caliber head coach. Beyond the amount of time that he's been here with Buffalo, I do not foresee Ralph Kruger returning as the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. And if you think the Buffalo Sabres fan base is pissed off now, if the Sabres bring back Ralph Kruger, I expect a lot of Buffalo Sabres fans post-COVID to show up at Seymour Knox Plaza and have some signs, holding up some signs towards the arena. That's what I expect. And frankly, for as angry as we are as Buffalo Sabres fans, for as angry as I am as a content creator, to have to know that, yeah, on one side of the coin, I got the Buffalo Bills to cover. I can talk positively about the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Sabres have just been an unmitigated disaster the last 10 years, but look no further than this particular season. This season was extremely embarrassing, has been an extremely rough season, and there are plenty of clouds hanging over this franchise. And look no further than obviously firing Ralph Kruger. That has to be the number one priority. I'm shocked that it hasn't happened already. Andrew Peters says it's not going to. I'll take his word for it over my own thought process. I don't see Ralph Kruger being let go. And it's just insanity to me that we are at this point still with all this quote-unquote young talent. And to me, the difference between young talent and actually building the right team and answering the question, can the Sabres be fixed? I think what makes the Buffalo Bills so successful as it stands right now is that they do have stars. They do have Josh Allen. They do have Stephon Diggs. They do have cornerstone-type players, Trey White. But you also got the guys that kind of fill the middle in. And what I mean by that is that there's the PB and J sandwich, right? You got the bread, the peanut butter, the jelly, and then the other slice of bread. You got to have the PB, you got to have the J. You can't have just one. You got to have both. Weird analogy, I know. But the jelly of the Sabres is like the John Felicianos, the guys like Harrison Phillips in the locker room, guys like Darrell Williams, guys like Mitch Morse, guys like Micah Hyde, guys like Jordan Poyer. Whereas the Sabres don't have those type of guys. They have their stars. They have Jack Eichel. They have Sam Reinhart. But then those middle-tier guys that build that locker room, that mesh that locker room together, are nowhere to be found. Those guys don't exist in this locker room. Those guys are not on this team because this team is either super young or is a team that has the ability to take some chances on some veterans. And part of that is the fact that Buffalo Sabres have created such a toxic organizational environment that I think that there's a case of, well, you're going to, Eric Stahl, he gets traded. I'm going to Buffalo. Man, I'll try to contribute as much as I can. I mean, there's not really a whole lot I can do for this team. I'll try to do as much as I can. There's a difference if Eric Stahl went to, let's just say, Montreal or, I don't know, Boston, say, oh, I'm going to be part of this team. Great. Get traded to Buffalo. I'll be as much of a part of this team as I can be because this team is so bad that these players cannot fulfill their full talent level due to the weak roster that they have. And, people talk about how talented this roster is. Well, there's about six. I'd say there's one really elite player, obviously Jack Eichel. And then there's like 3 or 4 really good players. We could say Rasmus Dahlin is elite. He has an elite skill set, no doubt about that. We'll say, for the sake of it, they have 2 elite players, Eichel and Dahlin. Then there's about 2 to 3 really good players, and then there's just a roster full of hodgepodge group of players. And that's why you see the results that you see each and every night. It is not a team that flows well. It is not a team that really has much of an identity. Can we say that the Sabres are physical? Can we say that the Sabres are offensive or defensive? No. They are just out there. And that's why, among the many reasons why they are where they are right now. But I talked about the dark cloud hanging over the Buffalo Sabres, and what does that exactly mean? And that's the Jack Eichel dilemma. And I'm sure that there's guys on this team that are really busting their hump. Guys like Dylan Cousins that are young players in this league that haven't even played, 25 games in this league, that are putting out the most effort possible. Guys like Jacob Bryson, who I've been very impressed with, by the way. And it's not like there has been just all bad. Dylan Cousins, Jacob Bryson, Casey Middlestat minus his terrible turnover the other night. I thought he has been much better in his second run around with the Sabres after being sent down to Rochester and then brought back to Buffalo. But knowing how bad they've been and knowing that there is this dark cloud hanging over their head in Jack Eichel, and the Jack Eichel dilemma is this: you tanked to own the pick that could get you Connor McDavid or Jack Eichel. And you lose the lottery, you lose out on McDavid. We could play the what-if game all night long, but really, would the situation be any better if we had McDavid? I don't know. I can't even go there. They don't win the lottery. They get Jack Eichel with the second overall pick. It's a pretty damn good consolation prize to go from McDavid to Eichel. It's a rarity that you have 2 really sound generational talents at 1 and 2 like that in a hockey draft, really since the days of Crosby and Ovechkin and Kane. And I mean, there really has been that many as of late, but to have that in one draft with McDavid and Eichel, that's really big. We get Eichel, and we get Ryan O'Reilly shortly thereafter. We get Evander Kane shortly thereafter. That whole situation crashes and burns in the midst of going from Tim Murray to Jason Botterill to now Kevin Adams and changing general managers. And what's the product of that? Well, the product of that is having a team that still has Jack Eichel, that still has Sam Reinhart, but also has the hodgepodge, as I've said, hodgepodge group of players that Tim Murray acquired, Botterill acquired, and Kevin Adams acquired. Mainly Botterill and Adams. There are far too few, not many, I should say. Not many, not far too few, but not many Sabres players remaining from that Tim Murray era, and that was only 3-4 years ago. So you've put a rebuild on top of a rebuild on top of a rebuild, and this guy that you just granted captain, you just gave him the C. You just put the C on his jersey, just threw the C patch right on his jersey without him really having to earn it, is now entitled. You have allowed Jack Eichel to become entitled. And I'm not saying Jack doesn't deserve to be entitled. Jack has every reason to be frustrated here. I feel for him. I definitely do. But the Sabres, in their own right, created a situation, and that situation is the team is bad. But on top of that, they created another situation. They gave Jack Eichel the ammo to react to their struggles and their futility in the way that he has, which is not say anything. I haven't seen many Jack Eichel interviews this season. Now we're at a point in the season where Jack Eichel is out with an undisclosed injury, which I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I am a realist. I think Jack Eichel does have an injury. I will say that first and foremost, but I also think that there's more to it than that. He has an injury. Why go out onto the ice with this team? And this is Jack talking, not me. Maybe his thought process is, why would I go out onto the ice knowing that this team is not going anywhere? Why would I put myself at risk and injure myself more for a team that hasn't even won 10 games? And to me, that's not the sign of a leader. And I think in terms of a locker room, for as many struggles as the Sabres have had, the one thing I can say is that the Sabres have built around Jack Eichel with that Jack Eichel line, whether it's Evander Kane or having Ryan O'Reilly as that second center or having Taylor Hall come in this past offseason. When the Sabres signed Taylor Hall, I thought, holy smokes, that's a real big fish that they just reeled in. And that hasn't amounted to anything. So I think from a leadership standpoint of Ralph Krueger not being the head coach, Jack Eichel not necessarily being the right captain for this team, and I'm not saying that they should strip Jack Eichel of the C. If they want to have him keep the C, that's fine for the optics of it, but the optics internally, you have to bring in more veteran players that have experienced the highs and lows of the National Hockey League, rather than having young players like Jack Eichel on top of or below even younger players like Dylan Cozens. I like those two guys, obviously. Those two guys are the future of this team for now. And I'll get to that a little bit later. But we need a better mix of veteran players on this team. Now, the question is, who the hell is going to want to come here without knowing who the head coach is? They have to get this head coaching situation right. There is a guy by the name of Bruce Boudreau that is available. He was head coach of the Capitals, head coach of the Wild. He's had 50-win seasons, 40-win seasons. If that guy's interested in getting back in the NHL, I would hope Terry Pegula makes him an offer that he can't refuse. That remains to be seen. But this whole, first-time head coach, Ralph Krueger, Phil Housley, these duds of head coaching hires that the Sabres have had, that the Pegulas have had, is something that has to change. And whether they trade Jack Eichel or not, let me tell you this. Okay, listen to what I'm saying. 17-year playoff drought, 10-year playoff drought, whether you're the Bills or the Sabres, the day that the Buffalo Sabres decide, if the Buffalo Sabres ever come to the conclusion that they should trade Jack Eichel, it will be one of the darkest days in Buffalo sports history. Worse than when Briere and Drury left for nothing. Worse than that. Because they have diminished Jack Eichel in every which way, that I think when they do finally trade him, it will be at a point where the team that trades for him will dictate what we get back. And if you're Jack Eichel and you're frustrated and you don't want to be here anymore, I get it. But, hey, buddy, you signed the contract. You signed this long-term deal. You got to honor it. If it was me, if I was Kevin Adams, there is no way I'm going to be the guy that will forever be known as the guy that traded Jack Eichel. I'd let somebody else be that guy before I'm that guy. Does Kevin Adams want to go down in history as the guy that traded Jack Eichel? I don't think so, and I hope not. I want Jack to stay here. I want the Sabres to finally stop wasting time and get this right. Hire a legitimate NHL head coach that has won in this league for a prolonged period of time. That's the elephant in the room. For as many stories that we have about success with the Buffalo Bills, the elephant in the room is that the Pegulas have made mistake after mistake after mistake. The Pegulas have made mistakes that are a laundry list of mistakes in regards to the Buffalo Sabres. And had it not been for the fact that the Bills brass at the time bring in this Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator by the name of Sean McDermott, if Buffalo didn't hire Sean McDermott, if the Buffalo Bills didn't hire Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane wouldn't be here. That's the truth. It was a package deal. two guys worked together in Carolina, knew each other very well, almost the same age, walked the same halls within the Carolina Panthers building. McDermott gets the opportunity to coach here, be our head coach. Shortly thereafter, Doug Whaley was gone and Brandon Beane came in. The NFL is a fraternity in that regard. Coaches, GMs, scouts, they know each other very well across all 32 teams. The Pegulas forced themselves to start from scratch. You had the longest tenured GM in Darcy Regier. You had the longest tenured head coach in Lindy Ruff. You decided that you were going to move on from those guys. You decided that you were going to go down the path of bringing in a president of hockey operations by the name of Pat LaFontaine. What the hell happened with that? We still don't know. 1 minute Pat LaFontaine was here. The next minute he was gone. And Tim Murray was in charge of things. Look how that turned out. You let go of Tim Murray. You bring in Jason Botterill, former Rochester American, who put more time in the minor league system on the ice as a player and off the ice as a GM than he did on the ice as an NHL player or off the ice as an NHL GM. That was his philosophy. Well, you won't last long in the NHL if that is your sole philosophy. Trading guys away like Ryan O'Reilly for essentially Tage Thompson. Trading Evander Kane away for essentially a first-round pick, which in the NHL, a late first-rounder is hogwash in comparison to a late first-rounder in the NFL. Isn't that funny how that works? But the Pegulas have put themselves in this situation with the Sabres. There's no doubt about it. And in terms of what they need, for the love of God, if I could get down on my knees right now and beg, I'm begging Terry and Kim Pegula to hire a National Hockey League head coach that has coached in the NHL for a prolonged period of time, that has had peaks and valleys, successes and failures. That's actually what the Sabres need. They need a coach that has seen it all rather than seeing bits and pieces of nothing. That's what they need. And if that's Bruce Boudreau, that's John Tortorella. I don't know if he's coming back to Columbus. I don't know. They need to bring in a coach that has a solid pedigree and someone that can pull the rug out from under these guys and let them know who the boss is. To an extent, that's another facet of this situation, that the players are so entitled. There's so much ego with these guys being World Junior MVPs and medalists and all that stuff, and Hobie Baker, trophy award winners, that they haven't known losing ever until they come to Buffalo. Well, a culture change needs to happen, and the culture change that happened at One Bills Drive, it's going to take a true genius of a coach to come in here, shake the players, shake them up, and get them to realize what they're actually made of, rather than these guys that have their heads in the clouds. I mean, these games this season for the Buffalo Sabres have been so terrible to watch. It has been embarrassing. Embarrassing. As a Buffalonian, I'm embarrassed for this team. And I hope that things change much, much sooner rather than later. But I think in the world of sports, when things are this bad, it only gets worse before it gets better. So maybe another rebuild on top of another rebuild on top of another rebuild on top of another rebuild will fix things. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was my take on the state of the Buffalo Sabres. Miss you, Lindy Ruff. It's been a bit. We miss you. Take care.